Good morning. Good morning. A warm welcome to all of you this crisp winter morning. We are happy to see so many smiling faces here at Central Unitarian in Westwood and are thrilled to have with us a wonderful group of members, friends, and visitors participating through Zoom. There is a team hard at work today making this service possible, and we are grateful to each one of them. Reverend Andrée Cornelia Mall, Matt Anderson, Central Unitarian's music director, and our wonderful audiovisual team, Phil Sosinsky and John Freund. Our welcome hosts this morning, Liz Stewart and Joseph Mahak. If you would, raise your hand. Visitors, please find Joseph and Liz, and they will have a cup of coffee with you this morning after service. Yes, there is coffee today, and that coffee hour is sponsored by George Johnson Orban, and we thank you to George. A hearty welcome for caffeine is always warranted, and thank you. My name is Susan Usatine, and I am happy to serve as your worship associate this morning. More than 20 years ago, Stephen and I walked through the doors of Central Unitarian. We sought a home that welcomed people of every faith, people who believe in God, people who don't, and people who are content to live with the mystery. When we returned to CUC in 2017 with our 3 children, we sought a religious home that offered nourishment to our spirits and celebrated its children and youth and welcomed children at every service every week. And we found all of that here. Members and friends at CUC intentionally welcome all. We are building a climate of purposeful inclusion where all can feel safe and cared for and provided an opportunity to form meaningful connections. We cherish the diversity of humanity, including differences in gender, race, ethnicity, range of abilities, orientation, and identity, financial means, education, and political perspectives. These beliefs informs this congregation's decisions and how we structure congregational life to empower and enhance everyone's participation. Speaking of participation, I have several participation opportunities and announcements to share with you this morning. First, the Interfaith Brotherhood and Sisterhood of Bergen County are hosting their annual brunch on February 19th at 10 a.m. at Seasons in Washington Township. This year's theme is Restoring Community. Join our local Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Baha'i, and Unitarian Universalist congregations for food and conversation, sponsored by the Sikh community. Tickets for the brunch are $50, and that cost can be covered by CUC if needed. Please do see Reverend Andrée for tickets. The next participation opportunity is lending your support to neighbors experiencing homelessness and hunger. Family Promise of Bergen County's Super 50/50 raffle is an easy way to support programs that have a big impact on vulnerable community members. The first place winner will receive 25% of the proceeds, up to $25,000. Plus, there will be 16 additional cash prizes. All proceeds help to fund programs that provide temporary housing and life-changing support services to working families experiencing homelessness, and the walk-in dinner program, which serves more than 200 meals every day. This program is on track to serve 70,000 meals this year, up from 53,000 last year. The raffle drawing will take place on March 21st at 11 a.m., and tickets are $100 each. For additional information or to purchase tickets, please see the link in the February bulletin. At this point, I would like to invite Kyan and Quinlan Kraft to the microphone.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name's Quinlan Kraft. I'm a former member of the youth group, and I am a current member of the upcoming Prague trip. And I would like to announce that we are again hosting the annual Center for Food Action February Food Drive. This year, my sister Clara will be hosting the food drive, but since she could not be here, I will be hosting this week instead. However, she will be taking over for the next few weeks. Our goal for the food drive this year is $1,000. If you guys aren't sure how to donate or need more information, we have our little poster that we'll have up after service during coffee hour, and we will be sending out emails as well. Thank you for your continued support.
Thank you to Kyan and Quinlan. Now, let us turn to our neighbors and give them a warm welcome and perhaps take a moment to toggle electronic devices into silent mode.
Good morning. Welcome. Hey, welcome. Good morning, Nat. Good morning, Nat.
Our opening words this morning come from the Reverend Rebecca Savage. We gather today with the sacred intention to declare that justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. Not here, not quite yet. The seeds have been planted time and again, and remember all those who went before us that made beloved community in our time a dream that could be realized. Justice is our prayer. May our time together continue to water the budding trees of our diverse interdependence. May our time together give air and nourishment to the parts of our collective spirits that need to grow and thrive in order to embrace equity as a known way of being. Justice is our prayer. We affirm in covenant with the beloved community that is possible. May it be so, and let us worship together. Please join me in rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 155, Circle Round for Freedom. Justice is our prayer. Let's add a little bit more energy to this now that we've gone through it once. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us in prison, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for me soul, for children
Now let us join our voices as we speak the chalice lighting words together. We light this chalice to remind us of our dreams, to nourish our heart, mind, and spirit, to work towards a better world for all, to embrace the whole of our human experience, to honor our past and our gifts of the present, to create a community where each of us may find healing, transformation, and hope.
I bring today a story adapted from a Middle Eastern Islamic folktale, which is attributed to different countries, including Turkey and Syria. This version of the story comes from the UUA Tapestry of Faith curriculum. Mullah Nasruddin had been working in the fields all day long. He was tired and sweaty, and his clothes and shoes were covered in mud and stains. Because he had been fasting all day long for Ramadan, he was also quite hungry. But finally, it was almost sundown, and Nasruddin knew that he would soon be able to eat. The wealthiest man in town had invited everyone to come break their fasts in his home that evening with a huge feast. Nasruddin knew that he would be late if he went home to change his clothes before going into town. So he decided it was better to arrive in dirty clothes than to be late. Oh, what a party it would be! What a feast! As he walked to the wealthy man's home, Nasruddin imagined the delicious foods he would be eating: dates, lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, all the best, all the desserts, halva, date rolls, figs, baklava. When Nasruddin arrived, the wealthy man opened the door and looked Nasruddin up and down scornfully, from his worn, ragged clothes down to his muddy shoes. Without a word of welcome, he gestured for Nasruddin to come in and walked abruptly away. Nasruddin joined the throngs of people who were all dressed in their finest clothing. The tables were laden with all sorts of delicious foods: dates, lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, and best of all, the desserts: halva, date rolls, figs, and baklava. Despite his efforts to hurry, the seats were all taken and nobody would move over to give space for Nasruddin. In fact, nobody offered him food. He had to reach over and around people to get any food for his plate. Nobody spoke to him. It was like he wasn't even there. The other guests ignored him so completely that Nasruddin could not enjoy the food on his plate, no matter how finely prepared and how tasty it was. In fact, after only a few bites, Nasruddin was so uncomfortable he decided to leave. He hurried home and changed into his finest clothing, including a beautiful coat. And Nasruddin returned to the feast, and this time the host welcomed him with a huge smile. Come in, greeted the host. As Nasruddin entered, people waved and called to him from corners of the room, and they invited him to sit near them and offered him food. Nasruddin sat down quietly. Picking up a plum fig, he carefully placed it into his coat pocket, saying, "Eat, coat, eat." Next, he took a handful of nuts and also put it in his pocket and said, "Eat, coat, eat." Now he began to feed his coat in earnest, grabbing all sorts of foods. He fed his coats lentils and chickpeas, olives and bread, hummus, falafel, chicken and beef, and best of all, the desserts: halva, date rolls, figs, and baklava. Nasruddin became silent as they watched his strange behavior. Soon, everyone in the room was staring at Nasruddin, wondering what he was doing. The host hurried over. "Nasruddin, what are you doing? Why are you feeding your coat in this manner?" "Well," replied Nasruddin, "when I first came to this feast in my old farming clothes, I was not welcome. No one would speak with me. But when I changed into this coat, suddenly I was greeted warmly. So I realized it was not me that was welcome to this party, but my clothing. So I am feeding my coat."
As a religious community, we encourage each other to grow more generous in spirit and in action. Those gathered here and afar support this self-supporting community and its ministries. We invite your offering at this time, freely given and gratefully received. Let us again join our voices as we speak our dedication words. We dedicate these gifts in service of our mission to welcome all into a home of spiritual diversity that challenges us to become our best selves, to minister to one another in love, and to serve the greater community.
Now we enter into a time of meditation, sharing together the joys and sorrows of this community. We do this as a way of caring for each other each week. I have a few written joys and sorrows to share, and then I will read out loud any joys or sorrows posted by those folks online. So if you're online, please share any joy or sorrows in the chat right now. I'll then invite you to share out loud the name of anybody else you're holding in your heart today. But let us begin by preparing ourselves. Let's all put a hand on our heart and feel our beating heart. This common heartbeat we share with humanity and other living beings. As we enter into a sacred space of interconnection, as we give and receive our joys and sorrows for today, February 4th, 2024. All these joys and all these sorrows, both those spoken and unspoken, let us hold them together with love as we enter into a moment of silence together. Spirit of life, source of love, that teaches us of goodness, of equity, of justice, of compassion. Help us find solace and peace as we hurt from those that we've lost. May their memory and their own love and care that they shared in this world continue to live on. Help us find solace in our heartache, our anger, our frustration, whatever we might be feeling, and those feelings may be many. For all that is happening in the world, for multiple wars, for escalating conflict, for greater divide, for the spread of hate. Help us work together to find another way forward, a way where we actually hear each other, a way where we all find a place at the table and all are welcomed. All are welcomed because of who they are, both because of our shared humanity and because of our deep differences. Help us find this way towards beloved community. Blessed be, and amen. I invite you to remain seated for our next hymn. This is going to be our monthly hymn this month, so we'll use it a number of times. This is familiar to us, This Little Light of Mine.
Our reading today is by Langston Hughes, a writer from the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 1930s. This poem, entitled "Let America Be America Again," was first published in 1936. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free.
America never was America to me.
Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man may be crushed by one above.
It never was America to me.
Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe.
There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free.
Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars?
I am the poor, white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush weak.
I am the young man, full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, or of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed.
I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker sold to the machine. I am the Negro servant to all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today, despite the dream. Beaten yet today, oh pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years.
Yet, I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings. In every brick and stone, in every furrow turned, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain, and England's grassy lay, and torn from black Africa's strand, I came to build a homeland of the free.
The free?
Who said the free? Not me? Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've flung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today.
Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose blood and sweat, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again.
Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again, America.
Oh, yes. Say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains and the endless plain, all that stretch to the great green states, and make America again. My grandfather bought my brother and I collectible coins from the Franklin Mint. One year, he bought us each a set of Lady Liberty commemorative coins, which celebrated the centennial of the Statue of Liberty. They came, I remember, in a rectangular blue velvet box, and the tight hinges would creak as I opened it. And I remember sitting in my grandparents' living room in front of their gigantic wooden television cabinet, if those that remember what a television cabinet is. And my box of commemorative coins were lying open in front of me, the silver dollar and half dollar shining in the evening lamplight. And the coins were encased in plastic. And I would take them out of the box and try to pry open the plastic cases so that I could hold the actual coin in my hand. And my grandfather sternly warned me that the cases were there to protect the coins. The oil in my hands would leave blemishes on them and diminish their value. So I used a tissue when I took them out of the plastic cases. And still I dropped the dollar once and got a small fingerprint on the back that I was never quite able to polish away. My grandfather was a proud citizen of this country. He lived through Nazi-occupied Holland during the war as part of the Dutch resistance. And after the war, he took expatriate jobs as an electrical engineer in various places around the world in hopes of moving to the United States with his wife and his young daughter, who was my mother. They finally moved in 1957, going directly from the Dominican Republic to Florida, where my grandfather had bought a car that was waiting for them. And they drove all the way across country, eventually stopping in the San Francisco Bay Area, where by coincidence, my father and his parents had also settled after emigrating from Holland to the US only a year earlier. So my brother and I were the only grandchildren on both sides of the family, and we got a lot of attention from both sets of grandparents who sacrificed so much to move to this country. My maternal grandfather, in addition to giving us coins, also helped us save for college. by putting money into our savings account based on the grades that we earned in school. Every quarter, I would give him my report card, and he had a calculation for how much he would put in my savings account for an A, a B, etc. Learning and getting a good education were important to him. And my brother and I were the first generation to go off to college and earn our degrees directly after high school. I never got a chance to ask my grandfather this, but I suspect that those Lady Liberty coins had special meaning to him. The purchase of the coins helped with the much-needed restoration of the Statue of Liberty in 1986. And perhaps for him, having left the country of his birth where he experienced both the Depression and World War II, the restoration helped to preserve, probably for him, the words of Emma Lazarus's poem, those words that are spoken with the statue's silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse on your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp besides the golden door. Stories surround us. We tell them to others. We tell them to ourselves. We echo the stories told to us through our culture. They become part of the way we identify who we are as a person, a friend, a neighbor, a country. They come from our past. They help speak of our present, and they shape our future. For as we hear and we tell stories, they become the narratives that we live into. Stories are everywhere. Yet we're not always completely aware that they are there at all. We might pluck them out of the air, we might put them on like glasses and use them to look around at the world. Sometimes, though, we've been wearing them for so long, we forget that they are there. Or we never noticed that we put them on in the first place. Our eyes and our brains just gradually got used to seeing the world through those stories. We don't see any distortions. We don't see anything wrong. Everything looks exactly as it was. At least that's the story we tell ourselves. And one of the stories we continue to live with in this country, and I see more and more of us starting to argue about, is the story of the American dream. And the poems spoken from Lady Liberty's silent lips are part of that story. Now, I thought that poem, or at least part of it, was inscribed somewhere on the statue itself, but it's actually not. The statue was France's gift to America, and it was designed to represent and celebrate Republican ideals such as liberty and freedom. It's Lazarus's poem that helped transform the statue into a symbol of refuge for immigrants seeking a new home. But it wasn't until 1903, which was 20 years after she wrote the poem, 17 years after the statue was dedicated, and actually 6 years after Lazarus herself had died, that one of her friends successfully led an effort to have a plaque with her poem added the statue's base where it could be viewed by and read by visitors. As a child of immigrants, I've experienced the promise offered by her poem. My family benefited from that dream. I held it in my hands, bright and shining, carefully protected from any blemishes in those Lady Liberty coins my grandfather gave to me. And I never questioned the story of Lady Liberty, her connections to the American dream or the American dream itself. I never considered that there were those around me that might not be included by this dream or even hurt by it. I never thought that the story of the American dream was an illusion, as we heard in our reading from Langston Hughes, where he says, America was never America for me. For Hughes, America is a land of the future, where decades later, Dr. King would speak about beloved community in a very similar way. It was not a current reality, it was something we were striving for. But that's not the traditional story we have told in our dominant culture in this country. Ta-Nehisi Coates also writes of the American dream in his book, Between the World and Me. which he presents as a letter to his son about growing up Black in America. I have seen that dream all my life, Coates writes. Its perfect houses with lawns, its Memorial Day cookouts, block associations and driveways. The dream is tree houses and club scouts. The dream smells like peppermint, but tastes like strawberry shortcake. And for so long, I've wanted to escape into that dream, to fold my country over my head like a blanket. But this has never been an option because the dream rests on our backs, the bedding made for our bodies. The control, the invasion, the violence against the inevitable breaking of Black bodies for Coates is evidence that the American dream is an illusion. And one particular body that finally shattered the dream for Coates was his friend, Prince Jones. Jones, like Coates, was a student at Howard University. His mother was born into poverty but followed the prescription of the American dream. She worked hard. She went to college. She became a radiologist. She bought a house, and she sent her son off to college. Yet none of this, Coates point out, made any difference. Because one night in 2000, her son Prince was trailed through 3 jurisdictions by a police officer who mistook him for somebody else and then shot him. Now, Coates says he doesn't believe that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. For him, he says it bends towards chaos. History, he said in an interview, is behind him on this. It's important, he tells us, that when we talk about arcs, we represent everybody's individual arc, he says. When Eric Garner was choked to death in Staten Island, Coates said in an interview, his life ended right there. It doesn't mean we can't take things from it. It doesn't mean we can't be inspired by that, but we shouldn't try to make ourselves feel better about it. We should sit with that pain. And Coates insists that this pain, this sense of despair which comes at the end of an individual arc, does not hold its proper place in our nation's history. He writes, the plunder of Black communities is not a bump on the road. It's the road itself. You can't have America without enslavement, without Jim Crow, without terrorism, without everything that came after that. It makes it very hard to preach to other countries and say, listen, we're the unbesmirched land of the free. Charlie Rose called Coates an artist giving words to what others are feeling, and Coates is quick to deny this, saying he's only sharing his own internal experiences. Either way, the experience of America and the American dream that Coates puts forth, and also that Langston Hughes in the 1930s is putting forth, it's hard to reconcile with my own family's experience. Coates' words are poetic, often as beautiful as they are harrowing. And I find his story and his retelling of our story as a nation, I find it hard to read. And as a Unitarian Universalist, I find his words on the arc of the moral universe, which is a quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who was also in turn actually quoting Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. I find Coates' words denying that idea hard to hear. The arc of the universe, moral universe, bends toward chaos, Coates says, but that's not what we tell ourselves as UUs. Now, many have wrestled with Coates' book, which came out in 2015, and others like it, which have come out through the years, way before Coates, and have continued since him, that's challenged our sense of democracy and the land of freedom and opportunity for all. One example I found is New York Times columnist David Brooks, who wrote an op-ed response to Coates about his book. And Brooks wrote the response as if he was writing directly to Coates. So Brooks wrote, "The disturbing challenge in your book is your rejection of the American dream. My ancestors, writes Brooks, chose to come here. For them, America was the antidote to the crusting restrictiveness of European life, to the pogroms. For them, the American dream was an uplifting spiritual creed that offered dignity, the chance to rise. And later in the article, he continued, the dream is a secular faith that has unified people across every known divide. It has unleashed ennobling energies and mobilized historic social reform movements. By dissolving the dream under the acid of an excessive realism, you chap generations in the past and destroy the guiding star that points to a better future. Now, Coates' book, as I was just saying, is part of a larger growing body of work that preceded him and for many years throughout our past, and it continues, and I'm finding that if you're looking at what people are writing and saying, it's continuing actually with a greater urgency. People whose experiences have traditionally been on the margins of our dominant culture, they're not looking to destroy the history that we've been telling. They're looking to retell American history, and they're looking to recast the American dream in a way that incorporates their experiences. Brooks' response in his op-ed piece echoes a sentiment that has been made countless times in response to this body of work and can be seen in the efforts to eliminate such work from libraries and from schools. So what do we do with this? Whose story is true? Where do we find meaning? My family's story of the American dream, David Brooks' story, his family story of the American dream, your family story of the American dream, Coates' story that the dream is an illusion? Which story is true, and how do we hold hope in a future with these conflicting stories? And how do we maintain optimism for our children without denying the reality of Coates' life and those of all Americans who share his experience of the dream as an illusion? I keep hearing descriptions of our political process, especially with this upcoming presidential election, as describing the election as a battle between two Americas. And to frame the divide in our country this way obscures this reality that this divide has actually been here all the way since colonists first set foot on this continent and began to settle on native land, claiming it as their own. So let us not fool ourselves. There has always been more than one story in this country. We're just, as a collective, becoming more and more aware of those stories. And this is where I have my biggest struggle with Brooks' article, with his op-ed piece, with his sentiment. Yes, his ancestors escaped persecution, and yes, his family, like mine and many others, sought refuge in the dream of this new land. But as painful as it might be to hear that our story is tarnished and damaged, as much as it challenges our sense of hope and optimism, Brooks chooses one story over the other. And his response, and the response of many others, appears to be, I can't accept your reality because it denies mine. And to say that you refuse to welcome or recognize another person's story because it differs from another person, it differs from your own, that's to deny their humanity. It's to treat another person like the people treated Mullah Nasruddin in our story. After all, Nasruddin throughout that whole story was always the same person. He didn't change. All that changed were his clothes. And they looked at Nasruddin as if he was the one in error feeding his coat, instead of looking at their own behavior and recognizing that they were in error. And the humor in the story of him feeding this coat is to point out that they were looking at a particular story and saying this is the only reality, instead of looking deeper and understanding the human being that was beneath that. Perhaps the work for us all is to remove the fancy coat that we've draped over the story of America by insisting that there is only one telling of our history, by removing the coat, we can better understand and recognize what is hidden beneath. And perhaps that work, for all of us who've been part of the dominant story and benefited from that story, is to listen. Listen very carefully and find ways in our own stories that they might be reframed by those who have experiences of oppression in this country, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. For as much as there's struggle in those stories, there's also hope and there's still optimism in those stories. So many of those stories, there is still a hope for the future, a place for collective liberation and equality, if we want the American dream to be a reality for all. If we want Lazarus's words for Lady Liberty to speak the truth of this land, then we need to find truth in our collective stories, not just the stories of the privileged at the expense of the stories of the oppressed. So with all these stories about us, how do we begin to construct a new one? For me, with my own story, that begins with taking that shining, perfect Lady Liberty coin out of the protective casings and touching it with my bare hands and letting those blemishes come, letting it be tarnished, for it is tarnished. That is where we have come from and that is where we're going. But even with that tarnished, there's still a beauty in that dream if we recognize that it can still be a place that we are going. Going forward doesn't necessarily mean polishing away that tarnish. It means telling the story of why it's there, so that we don't want to keep repeating ourselves, so that we can find a new future together. For only a future that acknowledges our presence and acknowledges how we got here is really going to create a future that I know I, as a Unitarian Universalist, want to emerge. It's a future with our eyes and our hearts wide open. And when we hand down such teaching to our children, we're not teaching them to hate this country, as many have claimed. Instead, we're teaching our children a more complex history of our democracy. We're teaching them to learn more deeply about equity and justice. We're teaching them to love each other. And we're teaching them the ways that we have fallen miserably short of that love, so that their generation can help chart a new way forward. In this way, by changing what our children hear, we are not hurting them. We are teaching them ways to live into a more beautiful future. The stories we tell matter, especially this year, especially in a year of an election, where we hear big proclamations of the border and foreign wars and protecting our children, proclamations which either obscure or detract from the real inequities and injustices of this world. And instead of accepting these proclamations and taking the stories that are handed to us from these politicians, we need to listen deeply to the stories of the people. We need to collect those stories, and we need to tell a new story of our own. My story, your story, Coates' story, and the stories of all those who have struggled and fought, those who have found the American dream for themselves, and those who still can't make their way toward it because they are denied that. And one of the ways many people are still denied that is through their voice, through voting, being obscured. That is a way of shutting out people's stories. We need to listen. And we need to clear a path so that all those stories can be heard, all the voices can be heard. And then we need to listen carefully to what emerges from the margins, pushed aside from the cacophony of the dominant narrative. In these stories, we will find pain and suffering, but we will also find beauty and joy. We will confront fear, but we're also going to find hope. These are the stories of our own. These are our collective stories. These are the stories we need to tell. What I had to say this morning, if anything, it's about one more movement forward towards a new future. And while there's heaviness in what I've shared this morning, as I keep emphasizing, there's also joy in it. There's joy in recognizing and understanding the experiences of our fellow human beings and finding a new way forward. And so for our closing hymn, which is a joyful hymn about moving toward that new future together, let us collectively celebrate that by singing this hymn. It's 168, One More Step. The other thing I'll say about this hymn is it was written before we had a collective better understanding of how ableist language was a way of shutting people out of our stories. So as we sing this first verse, One More Step, we also recognize that there's people who cannot make steps. They may roll, they may be carried, they may have a walker. So there's different ways we can think about this movement forward. So please rise in body or spirit for a closing hymn, One More Step.
Let us join our voices one more time together this morning as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not our promise to each other, to act with grace, to hold each other in love, to serve this community and our world. This promise of the heart serves as a reminder of how we live together. May it bring joy to our collective lives.
Before I offer the benediction, I was at a minister's retreat this week for many of the ministers in the New York metro area, and one of the themes that many of us kept talking about is how Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition that, while we, in our Sunday worships and in our programming that we do, we learn about it, we're inspired about it, it's a religious way of orientation that doesn't live unless we bring it out into the world, right? Unitarian Universalism lives out in the world. So the words I shared this morning are about thinking through how can we live this out in our daily lives and in our world. In that vein, I share these closing words, Justice is Our Prayer, by Reverend Rebecca Savage, who also had the opening words I shared. We've come to the end of our service, but not our calling in the world. May we close our time together with the humble reminder that justice and equity are our spiritual practices to embrace. Each, every day, we are blessed to be the embodiment of what is possible when justice and equity ground us in all that we do May we go forth with the light and warmth of the chalice in our hearts until we meet again. Blessed be, and amen. Thank you, Matt, for our music this morning. Thank you, Susan Usatine, for being my worship associate. Thank you to John and Phil on our tech team. And thank you to George for doing our coffee. So please stay for coffee and connection in this space. I will also ask that those of you that are going to be here for the Journaling as a Spiritual Practice session will gather here in front of the stage at around noon. And also, if folks can help clean out the chairs at some point during the coffee hour, if you're able to, and put them in the racks, we need the space cleared for an activity later this week. So if you're able to do that at some point, that would be fantastic. Blessings to you all.